Those who support injecting themselves with chemical substances that they believe keep them healthy often use one incident to justify their opinion when being challenged. This incident is mostly about how lethal injections saved someone they know from getting a disease called polio. So today I want to focus on one of these polio stories. I researched a polio outbreak that took place in the Netherlands in 1992, and I want you to look at what I found. In many cases, when an individual raises questions about the safety or effectiveness of substance injection into people's veins, he encounters reactions like, "Have you ever studied virology? Who are you to question authority?" These kind of comments will usually come from journalists who graduated media studies and those who still follow the news and quote these journalists. The reason I made this video is because I want as many people as possible to see the difference between the story they are told on television and what really happened. In the years 1992 and 1993, after 14 years since the last polio case in the Netherlands, 71 people were diagnosed with the disease. The outbreak ended with the death of 2 people and 59 others were paralyzed. 70 out of 71 patients lived in a religious Christian community in the Netherlands, a place where apparently nobody injected themselves with the government-approved substances. The sequence analysis of the genome showed similarity to a strain from India that was isolated in 1992. Being the serious investigator that I am, I decided to get more information by reading the entire article. But then I found out that they charge almost $36 to buy an article from 1994? What? Instead of throwing my money on the worst science fiction story I read in my life, I decided to get the information that I needed from a different source. So I checked the CDC website. The Netherlands experienced an outbreak of 71 cases among members of a religious group who do not routinely accept vaccination, caused by importation of wild poliovirus that originated from the Indian subcontinent. This time we know for sure that the disease came from India, because the CDC told us that it did. But now the group of religious outlaws don't routinely accept injections. Do they object the idea altogether, or was it a one-time slip-off? If I forget to take my routine injection, will I get this horrible disease as well? And what is this community's name? Why is it not mentioned anywhere? The CDC published this partial list of confirmed cases of polio. The list is from October of 92, when the outbreak only began. At this point, there were 5 cases, and the health officials of the Netherlands took it upon themselves to save the day and inject the cure to groups at risk. Going through the list, I found some contradictions with what we were led to believe in the beginning. Case 2 describes a student who did get an injection and only then got the virus. Case 3 mentions a boy from Utrecht, while the other cases are from South Holland. Didn't we say that the outbreak took place in a closed, uninjected community? Was that a scientific conclusion, or was a certain group used as scapegoat? And they only needed 5 confirmed cases to reach their conclusion, when one of the cases wasn't even part of the community? I found another article about the outbreak. Here they mention only 67 confirmed cases. Didn't we have 71? And once again, they blame this nameless religious group who refuses to be injected. But we just saw a case where the patient was injected. and one case where the patient wasn't part of the community. I wanted to check the work history of the researchers who published this article, and what can I say? Someone is obsessed. Why does it look like this researcher's entire career depends on this one disease? Was there a hidden agenda behind all of these articles? What about slandering an entire group of people using general statements and fitting the data to the conclusion you wanted to reach when you only had 5 confirmed cases? And how did the virus get from India to a close religious community in the Netherlands? 1 month and 5 confirmed cases into the outbreak were enough for the researchers to conclude that the reason for the outbreak was this mysterious uninjected group of religious people from an unnamed location. Does that sound like scientific research? I kept digging and found the full research I showed in the beginning. Already in the summary they talk about the reason this outbreak took place. People who didn't inject themselves for religious reasons. Here we finally get the name of the place where 70 out of 71 patients came from. Streefkerk, a small town nearby Rotterdam. The first thing I noticed when I looked at this town's location is the distance between the town and the province of Utrecht. Utrecht had the one patient who didn't come from this village, who, by the way, is not mentioned once in this paper. And what I want you to see here is all of the nearby places of residence. Look how many villages are in this area that are much closer to Streefkerk than Utrecht province, and yet no patients came from there. Here is the full story. On September 17th of 1992, a 14-year-old kid from this village became paralyzed and was brought to the hospital. They were running a bunch of tests for polio. All came back negative. His siblings were tested too and got positive results. I'm wondering why they would insist this was polio if the results were negative, but let's move on. Apparently the wild nature of this virus is the reason the test came back negative, but the siblings still somehow got positive results. Maybe there's an expert who can explain to me how this makes any sense. The researchers keep repeating in their paper that the area was inhabited by uninjected people. I'm going to assume they also repeated this sentence in the news again and again. There is a scientific field called Neuro-Linguistic Programming. It's a way to make a person believe in something by repeating a certain phrase over and over. Basically, it is some sort of hypnosis. It doesn't have to be evil, but it is used a lot by politicians and news anchors who don't have your best interest in mind. Now back to our story. Less than a week after this kid was treated in the hospital, a mass injection program began in the surrounding area. And one day after the injection program started, they found a second patient with symptoms of polio. Let me repeat that. There was a sick kid in the hospital. The hospital tests were shady and it looks like they already drew their conclusions before they even got the results. Everyone starts panicking, the government starts a mass injection program, and right after that, more people with symptoms show up. Does that sound familiar to you? And what are you going to say the next time a government official offers to take care of your health? Here we got some more irrelevant data. They talk about a town called Nunspeet for some reason, which is almost the other side of the country. Not kidding, when I read this, I thought the authors were just trying to meet their words quota. In the discussion section, they repeat their mantra, no patient in the present outbreak had been vaccinated. But I thought that the second patient only showed symptoms after the injection program began. This is all really confusing. They also mention other polio outbreaks around the world. What will I find if I decided to look into the other outbreaks as well? Many years ago I submitted my thesis for my studies. And I just wonder what would be my professor's reaction to my paper if it looked like this research. I imagine they would tell me that they don't respect my work enough to wipe their asses with it. Honestly, this document looked nothing like research to me. The data gathering, the analysis, the conclusion, all look like they were decided in advance. To me, this seems less like a research paper and more like an aggressive marketing campaign meant for people to accept lethal injections. And if you agree with me, I ask that you share this video with people who consider being injected, and also people who were already injected because they will be pressured to get injected again. This thing isn't going anywhere.